support group of people from Sherburne, Stearns, helping try to get more of our youth educated when it comes to agriculture. And Gene Johnson, who lives in Sherburne, if you ever been on Minnesota 25 north of Becker and you see Norm's Market, that's her father-in-law. You know, that it's got that little food stand there right off of Highway 10 as you head north on Minnesota 25. And very active in agriculture. And they and us, we recognize the need for educating youth about agriculture. And as we have less and less people involved with the production of our food, it's just important that kids see and how we produce food, and we do it in a way to protect our natural resources. So we've been involved with this, and they've got their big clay shoot coming up. And this is a fundraiser, so don't be expecting you're going to be shooting for free. This is $360 per four-person team, and that's if you get registered by Wednesday, August 10th. And if you're interested, you can give us a call at 320-743-4960. And the actual shoot is on Thursday, August 25th, and it's going to be at the Wild Marsh Sporting Clays facility, which is between St. Cloud and Santiago. And they're going to start shooting at 3 p.m. sharp. And then after that, they're going to have a dinner at the Jack and Jim's facility in Duelm. And that'll be at 5:30, and actually opens up at 4 p.m. at Jack and Jim's. And that's open to the public. If you don't want to shoot and just want to buy a banquet ticket, they're $25, and you can get those by giving that number a call. That gives you Jean Johnson's phone number. Just give her a call, and she will get you the information on the Farm Friends Barn. Let me give you another phone number here. That's 320-248-2615. That, once again, will get you to one of the Farm Friends Barn contacts. And if you'd like to donate any items to this event, don't be afraid to give her a call at that same number, 320-248-2615. At the dinner, we have a banquet and also raffles for prizes. So it's just a fun event. And if you haven't... If you have not eaten at Jack and Jim's, you should check it out. It's a very good, well-recognized eating facility in the St. Cloud area, and it's a fun place to be. They do serve beer, too.
And when is this again? This is
going to be Thursday, August 25th.
Okay.
And if you're going to join us for Sporting Clays, get your team put together and do that by August 10th. And it's $360 per team. If you want to be a platinum sponsor, that'll be $1,000, and that includes a team of four dinner, a large center logo featured on the sponsor banner, and that'll be displayed at the event. Or if you just want to be a gold sponsor, that also includes the team, and then also you get featured a little smaller logo on the sponsor banner. So all the promoters of the event get recognized. If you got any more questions, don't be afraid to give us a call, Gene Johnson, at 320-248-2615. And also if you Google Farm Friends Barn Clay Shoot, there's more information on the website.
Okay, we got about 3 minutes before I got to take a break, Dennis. And Rick, what else should we talk about?
I have a few field days that I would like to talk about, Brad.
Okay.
The first one is a forage field day. It's going to be held on August 17th from 10:30 till 12:30, and it's located at the O&S Dairy up in Rice, Minnesota. That dairy is run by Bruce and Linda Olson and Troy and Melissa Schrendel. And what they're going to be having out there is registrations at 10 o'clock. The program is going to start at 10:30. They're going to cover growing and harvesting storage for a good feed quality. And they're going to have a bunch of variety plots that they have out there. They have 6 different varieties of alfalfa and tall fescue. They also have some plots out there for alternative forage. These are mainly cover crop plots that you can use for forage. They're going to have a discussion on cover crops. And then they're also going to give an update about the buffer strip rules. And if you have any questions or you'd like to attend, you can contact the Benton County Extension Office at 968-5077. Or you can try the 1-800 number, and that is 1-800-964-4929. And it is located 6 miles east of Rice to Silver Corners on Minnesota Highway 25, and then a mile north and a mile west. So if you're interested in that event, why don't you give that number a call, 968-5077, and they can give you some more information.
Okay, got about a minute. We can take a break, but what else can we talk about quickly here?
Well, as soon as we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the buffers and what's required with the buffers. I think most of the listeners, landowners out there, realize that Minnesota passed a buffer law last year, and it was tweaked just a little bit this year to make sure that we were not buffering private ditches. We're just looking at public waters identified by the DNR, and we'll talk more about that when we get back, and hopefully we get a few folks calling in, too, with some questions on the buffer law.
845-2184 or 1-800-950-2148. News time coming up. Answers Party Line continues this morning, visiting with Dennis Fuchs, SWCD, Rick Berscheid, NRCS this morning, talking about now buffer law. What's with that? What's with that?
All right. I'm going to talk about
Tell us more.
Well, most everybody knows that Minnesota has a buffer law that the state passed last year and tweaked a little bit this year. And after reviewing what was actually done, it hasn't really changed much of what was required originally through the shoreland ordinance with the county. The county did not enforce the shoreland ordinance very aggressively, and there's a lot of areas out there that required a buffer already through the shoreland ordinance. And basically what this is doing is making it across the state uniform, making sure that all these buffers get installed as they should be according to the shoreland ordinance, or now the Minnesota buffer law. So what are some of the requirements of the buffer law? Well, all public waters, rivers, lakes, streams, and wetlands, and that's public waters that have been mapped by the DNR. And that's something that we can talk about later. But there's a website that you can zoom into your farm and see where on your farm or on your lake home or on your rural residence where you need to have these buffers. And so rivers, lakes, streams, and wetlands are going to require an average of a 50-foot buffer of perennial vegetation and a minimum width of 30. And then all public drainage systems require a 16.5-foot buffer. Now, the alternative practices based on the Natural Resources Conservation Service guidelines or approved by the state agency, the Board of Soil and Water Resources, will be allowed for public waters and public drainage systems also. So we're still waiting to see what those alternative ag practices are to give us a little bit of a better idea, but we're thinking it'll be reduced tillage systems, cover crops. You may have an area where there's very little opportunity for water to enter the public stream or ditch, and maybe a grass waterway would be a better conservation practice, and we can assist with getting something like that installed also. Now, if you're wondering how long do you have to put in a buffer to comply with the law, on public waters, buffers must be seeded by November 1st, 2017. So if you think about it, you take off your crop this fall. Next spring, you probably don't want to be planting corn or soybeans in that area. You probably want to make sure that you got some type of perennial vegetation planted in those areas. Now, on public drainage systems, you get an extra year. The deadline is November 1st of 2018. And as you know, on public drainage systems, the buffer is required regardless if the system has undergone the redetermination of benefits and the damages of public drainage system under drainage law. However, compensation provided under drainage law may be used in advance or retroactively to provide compensation for all or part of the buffer strip establishment or alternative riparian water quality practice. And in Stearns County, the Sauk River Watershed District has authority over the ditches. That's been delegated by the county. And then also the North Fork Crow River Watershed District has authority over those ditches. And the rest of the county is covered by Stearns County, and we'll be assisting them in getting those areas buffered. Watershed districts have also put some markers out to indicate the 16.5-foot buffer, and that you'll be seeing those popping up especially in the North Fork watershed area. And okay, can you review what the redetermination and benefit process is? For any activity such as maintenance or improvements to a public drainage system, that results in viewers to assess benefits and damages. So the ditch authority can order that a permanent strip of perennial vegetation be approved. So that all of that stuff is through the watershed district, and the ditch component we'll let those folks worry about making sure those get buffered properly. Now, where is the start of the buffer measured from? For public waters, the buffer width is measured from the top or crown of the bank or from the edge of the normal water level. Now, there is no definition. There's the ordinary high, which has got an official definition of what that means. Normal water level is a new terminology that we haven't used before. So what's normal?
Yeah. Who determines that?
And, people look at me and they say that ain't normal. But so we'll be working on that. And I know the guidance provided by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, who have to administer the buffer law, they really want to keep it common sense. And let's not be doing things out there that complicate the program more than it needs to be. Okay, and the width of the buffer on a public drainage system must be measured from the top edge of the existing constructed channel, which I think a lot of landowners already knew that.
Do you get a leeway here as far as measuring, like a couple inches off or anything like that?
We're not the regulatory unit behind the buffer law, and we still don't know if it's going to be the county for the buffer associated with public waters or the state agency, the Board of Water and Soil Resources. So our role is to help make sure farmers are in compliance, landowners, and we want to be as fair as possible too. Yeah. We're more concerned about protecting the resource, and if you've got a fairly flat area and you're bouncing around between 40 and 50, is the resource protected is what we're going to be looking at. And the Board of Water and Soil Resources will be doing some spot checks. We want to make sure we're doing a good job, but we also want to practice common sense as much as we have it, if you know what I mean.
It's hard to enforce common sense, though, sometimes.
I know, and it's not commonly found.
I agree. I commonly agree about that.
Okay. What if a buffer will not provide adequate protection on certain waterways? Are alternative practices allowed? Yes. The Board of Soil and Water Resources will approve alternative riparian water quality practices, and those probably have to follow the NRCS Field Office Tech Guide, which we're still waiting for the actual information from the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And the word on the street, it'll probably be in September, October, when we get the official words of wisdom from them on the alternative ag practices. What if a farmer does not comply with the buffer law by the deadline? They can assess a penalty of up to $500 for noncompliance. The Board of Soil and Water Resources is developing a plan to issue administrative penalty orders, or it can be enforced locally by the county or watershed. Local SWCDs will help the landowners comply with the buffer law, but will not be enforcing the law. A new bill recently signed by the governor offers several clarifications on the original buffer legislation passed in 2015, and here's a couple of those clarifications. Does the clarification bill make it clear that private ditches are exempt from the new buffer law? It does. However, there may be cases where a landowner thinks he or she has a private ditch but has actually a public water. In relation to the buffer law, the term public water means waters that are on the DNR public water inventory map. And I'll give an example of where this happened in Lake Henry, because I know Lake Henry Township a little bit. And on one side of the road, there was no buffer requirement whatsoever. And these were streams that were straightened out probably 50 to 100 years ago, and which I thought were private ditches. And on one side of the road, there was no buffer required. On the other side of the road, a 50-foot buffer, because these public waters inventory, when they did the map back in the late 70s, early 80s, they looked at you had to have over 2 square miles of contributing watershed before it could be considered a public water, and you want to have significant flow. And this was the beginning of the watershed. So on one side of the road, there was not enough watershed to be part of to classify it as a stream. On the other side of the road, it is. So if I was this landowner, I'm looking at a straight ditch, which I didn't have any idea was now on the public waters inventory, and it goes through the middle of my field, and now it requires 50 feet on both sides. So you're taking out 100-foot strip out of your farm field. And that's where alternative ag practices might be able to reduce that buffer width to some extent, but according to some of the information I'm looking at, that might be a minimum of 30 feet versus 50. So you still would have 60 feet of ag land coming out of production. So some of these here situations, I really encourage the listeners to take a look at the buffer map online. You just do a search for DNR Minnesota buffer map, and it'll pop up, and you can zoom right into your farm and take a look. Or if you have questions, come to our office. We now have a computer sitting at the front counter to help folks that have questions and that don't have a computer at home. And we also will be working on doing a massive mailing out to all property owners impacted by the Minnesota ditch buffer requirements sometime later this year, early next year. And then we might even have some informational meetings if there seems to be a lot of demand for more information. We might even have some small town workshops. Get out here in Greater Stearns County and check it out. But this is parcel by parcel. So Ben Ruley, our GIS conservationist guru in the office, laid all the parcels that are impacted by this buffer map, and we have 11,300 parcels that have to be evaluated to make sure they're in compliance. So there's just a lot of work associated with this, and it's going to take us some time to get through. And we're also identifying some areas on the map that were mapped and there is no longer, looking at the new high-resolution aerial photography available for Stearns County, there is no defined channel where there was a line identified as a public waters inventory stream. So we're going to have to go out and do some modification on where the buffer is supposed to be. And the DNR is the public waters inventory owner of that information. If you're going to modify it, you have to work with the Minnesota DNR to modify that line. And there's been, that was in the late 70s, early 80s, and we've got a lot better resolution of aerial photography. We've got digital elevation maps now that were collected as part of this, so we can do actually terrain analysis, and we can see how big these watersheds. We just got a lot better information. So the map, in my mind, should have been revamped, modernized before they threw the buffer law out. But opening up that Minnesota public waters inventory would be like Waters of the USA when the EPA opened that up, and there was a lot of folks out there that didn't like what the EPA was proposing for modifications. Some folks were thinking that a puddle would have to be enforced with the Clean Water Act at the federal level. So I can see why here in Minnesota they were reluctant to do that, but we've got such great high-resolution aerial photography. We've got basically the whole state flowing to develop these digital elevation maps, and you can really see where there are defined channels or ditches with this information versus what we had back in the early 80s.
Dennis, can you actually, what you just described, everything there, can you actually look at that and placing yourself out of the, on the outside and looking in, can you say to yourself, this all is doable, it makes sense? Because it sounds like you're talking about alternative ag practices that you need to figure those out yet. It sounds like a work in progress you're trying to enforce, even though it hasn't been ironed out yet, kind of.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that's going to have to get ironed out yet. But keep in mind, I got a feeling that a big majority of our landowners are going to be in compliance already. A lot of the folks on the lakes are going to be already meeting the buffer requirement because it's perennial vegetation. Turf grass is a perennial vegetation, so you're good there. some of the areas like along the Sauk River, when you look at the floodplain area, the river's over here, but there's 100 feet before the ag land starts because that's down in the flood fringe or floodplain, and it just doesn't pay to farm that. And in a lot of those situations, if they are farming, they're grazing it, and there is still established vegetation throughout the year, so that would get them in compliance too. The alternative ag practices, we got a pretty good idea what it's going to take. So it's just some of these lines that we're looking at. And, we always zone in on the bad areas, like out in the flat area around El Rosa, there's a lot of things that have changed in the last 40 years. And what was a stream maybe 40 years ago now is subsurface tile,
Right.
So there is it's farmed completely over. So we just got a lot of work to do there. And then if farmers are interested in participating in any program, there are a couple programs that are active in the one that's available throughout the county and throughout the state is the continuous CRP filter strip. And this is where you have to have a CRP contract. So it's got some restrictions. And I'm just going to run through some bullets associated with the continuous CRP and give it some thought as if this is something that you'd be interested in pursuing on your farm. The filter strip width has to be somewhere between 30 foot and 120, and to be in compliance with the buffer law, you might have to go a little bit wider than 30. You can do a 10 or 15-year contract, and you're planting a perennial grass cover. The Stearns County payment range, and the higher payments are associated with better soils, ranges from $127 to $192. That's per acre per year. And it must have been cropped at least 4 years between 2008 and 2013. You cannot be haying or grazing it now. And it must be owned 1 year prior to enrollment. And then you also have to do mid-contract management, which could be a mowing or a burn, depending on your particular site. So that's the continuous CRP filter strip. And if you're interested in that, give our office a call, and we'll make a site visit and help you through the process. But Jason and Kevin Roth in our office take lead on that. The other program that is available in the Sauk watershed, and this is through the Sauk River Watershed District, and we're cooperating with them on promoting this. And once again, if you're interested in the Sauk River Hade Buffer, contact us. Both Jason and Kevin will help you through the process. But this is only available for lands within the Middle Sauk watershed, and we've got the map, which Albany is in the South Two River, so that's outside of the Sauk. But some folks in the Richmond chain of lakes and upstream might be eligible for that. That's a 10-year contract, and that's $100 an acre per year. And this program, unlike the CRP program, allows up to 2 cuttings between June 15th and September 1st. These areas cannot be grazed, and then the permanent vegetative buffer required to be planted and maintained over the life of the contract. So you just got to make sure you keep it in a good growing condition throughout the contract, 10-year contract length. So those are the 2 programs available right now. There also is Reinvest in Minnesota, which is a permanent easement, and we were trying to get some additional bonding bill dollars, and then also leverage from some USDA CRP payments where you put both RIM and CRP together, and they call it CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. And right now that funding is limited because the legislators did not pass a bonding bill this year, and we have not heard from USDA yet. So basically we're down to 2 programs to offset the cost of any ag production losses associated with the buffer program, and that's the continuous CRP filter strip program. And those rates range from $127 to $192 an acre, and you cannot harvest that for hay. And then the Sauk River Watershed District's Hade Buffer program, and that is $100 an acre a year, and you can harvest it twice, June 15th through September 1st. And they don't want you to harvest it after September 1st because they also want to get some regrowth on that so that it filters sediment and acts as a better buffer. So Yeah, those are the programs, and there's a lot of stuff to be done in a short period of time. So I really encourage you to take a look at those buffer maps as you're harvesting before you harvest, and maybe even think about doing something this fall to start getting that perennial buffer area established where it might be required on your farm.
3 minutes.
Geez. Really?
Time's flying, yeah.
Gosh, Rick wanted to cover one more
Sure.
activity.
Yeah, I have another outreach event going on here. The University of Minnesota Extension Office, they're putting on 2 grazing walks. One was last week, August 3rd, at the Roy Lensing Farm, and there will be another one coming up September 7th at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and this one will be held at the Nate and Angie Walter Farm, located at 11034 110th Street in Villard. The Walters milk 100 cows that are rotationally grazed. They're a master grazer with the dairy grazing apprenticeship. The topics covered will be a pasture walk, will include crop rotations, grazing strips, and winter rye for spring grazing. And the dairy grazing apprenticeship is a initiative to train new generation in the grazing business and to give retiring farmers options for passing on their farm. It's going to be a great event. RSVPs are required. You can RSVP or get some more information by calling 507-421-7170. And that event, again, is September 7th over by Villard.
Okay. Very good.
Well, thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you so much. Dennis, go ahead.
We'll see you in September.
Oh, yeah, that's right. See you in September. Dennis Fuchs, Rick Berscheid here on Chasm Radio, NRCS Party Line. We'll continue with more after this.